The October wind rattled against the windows of Eleanor Morrison's Victorian home in Burlington, Vermont, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and distant wood smoke. At 78, Eleanor had grown accustomed to the sounds of her house, the way the floorboards creaked in the hallway, the gentle hum of the ancient radiator, the whisper of wind through the maple trees that had stood sentinel over her property for longer than she'd been alive. What she wasn't accustomed to was the sharp knock that interrupted her afternoon tea. Eleanor set down her china cup, the one with the tiny roses painted along the rim that Harold had given her for their 40th anniversary. She moved slowly toward the door, her arthritis particularly troublesome in the damp weather. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal business suit, holding a leather portfolio and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Morrison?" the woman said when Eleanor opened the door, the security chain still in place. "My name is Victoria Kellner. I'm here about your nephew, Michael." Eleanor's heart skipped. She hadn't heard from Michael in nearly 3 years, not since that terrible argument at Thanksgiving when he'd asked her for money to invest in some cryptocurrency scheme. "Is he all right? Has something happened?" "Oh, he's fine," Victoria assured her, that practiced smile widening. "May I come in? I have some documents he asked me to deliver personally." Against her better judgment, Eleanor unlatched the chain. The woman's heels clicked against the hardwood as she entered, her eyes sweeping over the interior with an appraising look that made Eleanor uncomfortable. The living room was exactly as it had been for decades. Floral wallpaper, doilies on every surface, photographs chronicling a lifetime of memories. Harold smiled at her from a dozen frames, forever frozen in better times. "What a lovely home," Victoria said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "How long have you lived here?" 52 years this December, Eleanor replied, gesturing for the woman to sit on the sofa while she took her usual chair. "My late husband and I bought it just after we were married." "Now what's this about Michael?" Victoria opened her portfolio with practiced efficiency. "Your nephew is concerned about you living alone in such a large house. He mentioned you've had some falls recently." Eleanor frowned. She'd slipped on some ice last winter. Nothing serious, but she'd made the mistake of mentioning it to Michael's mother, her sister Ruth, during one of their weekly phone calls. "I'm managing quite well, thank you." "Of course you are," Victoria said smoothly, pulling out a stack of papers. "But Michael wants to ensure you're protected. He's suggested a wonderful arrangement that would allow you to continue living here while providing you with additional support and security." "I don't understand," Eleanor said, reaching for her reading glasses on the side table. "What kind of arrangement?" "It's quite simple, really. Michael would become a co-owner of the property, purely for your protection, of course. This way, if anything were to happen, God forbid, the house would remain in the family without the complications of probate. It's a common estate planning tool." Eleanor's fingers tightened on her glasses. "Michael wants to put his name on my house? Think of it as insurance," Victoria continued, sliding the papers across the coffee table. "You would retain full rights to live here for the rest of your life. This just ensures that your wishes are carried out and that the property stays in the family. Michael mentioned how much this house means to you, all the memories with your late husband." The mention of Harold made Eleanor's chest tighten. They'd planned to leave the house to the Burlington Historical Society, along with a fund for its maintenance. It had been Harold's idea. He'd loved the history of the place, the way it connected to the town's past, but she'd never put it in writing, always meaning to get around to it. And now, "I'd need to think about this," Eleanor said carefully. "Perhaps I should speak with my attorney." Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course, though I should mention that Michael is quite eager to get this settled. He's been worried sick about you, especially after hearing about your fall. He'd hate for you to go through another winter without this protection in place." "My fall was 10 months ago," Eleanor said, a prickle of suspicion running down her spine. "And it was barely a stumble." "Still," Victoria pressed, "at your age, these things can escalate quickly. Michael shared that you've been forgetting things lately, leaving the stove on, missing appointments." "I most certainly have not," Eleanor began, then stopped. There had been that one time she'd left a pot on the stove, but she'd caught it within minutes. And she'd mixed up her dentist appointment, but only because they'd changed it at the last minute. How did Michael even know about these things? Ruth, her sister, must have mentioned them in passing, and Michael had transformed minor incidents into evidence of decline. "I can see you're upset," Victoria said, leaning forward with practiced concern. "Michael only wants what's best for you. He specifically asked me to make sure you understood that nothing would change. You'd still live here, still make all the decisions about the property. This is just paperwork, really. A formality to protect your interests." Eleanor studied the woman's face, noting the calculated warmth, the way her fingers drummed impatiently against her portfolio when she thought Eleanor wasn't looking. And you are, what exactly? A lawyer? I'm a senior advisor with Estate Planning Solutions, Victoria said, producing a business card with a flourish. We specialize in helping families navigate these difficult transitions. I see, Eleanor murmured, though she didn't, not really. The card was thick, expensive-looking, with embossed lettering that suggested legitimacy. But something felt off, like a painting hung slightly crooked. The documents are quite straightforward, Victoria continued, flipping through the pages. This one adds Michael to the deed as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. This one gives him power of attorney in case you become incapacitated. Standard precautionary measure. And this one, Eleanor watched the pages flip by, dense with legal terminology that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. Her eyes caught phrases like transfer of interest and irrevocable designation that made her stomach churn. I really do need to speak with someone about this, Eleanor said firmly. My attorney, or perhaps my friend Margaret. Her son is a real estate lawyer in Montpellier. There's really no need for that expense, Victoria said quickly. Everything has been reviewed by our legal team. Michael has already paid for all the services. He didn't want you to worry about any of that. The radiator clanged suddenly, making both women jump. Eleanor used the distraction to stand, a clear signal that the visit was over. I appreciate you coming, Ms. Kellner, but I need time to review these documents properly. Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Morrison, I hate to pressure you, but Michael did mention that if you weren't willing to take these basic precautions, he might need to explore other options. Adult protective services, perhaps. He's documented several concerning incidents. The threat hung in the air between them like a blade. Eleanor felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to remain standing. Is that so? He only wants you to be safe, Victoria said, standing as well, smoothing her skirt. A woman your age, living alone in a house this size, 3 stories, all those stairs. That steep driveway that must be treacherous in winter. It would be tragic if something happened and you hadn't taken simple steps to protect yourself and your assets. Eleanor moved toward the door, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the knob. Thank you for your concern. Please tell Michael that I'll be in touch when I've made my decision. Victoria gathered her things with obvious reluctance. At the door, she turned back. I do hope you'll make the right choice, Mrs. Morrison. Michael asked me to give you this as well. She pulled out a manila envelope. Photos from the Thanksgiving you mentioned you couldn't quite remember clearly. He thought they might help jog your memory about your conversation that day. Eleanor took the envelope with numb fingers. She didn't remember being unclear about that Thanksgiving, but now Victoria was making her doubt herself. Was her memory slipping? No. She remembered exactly what was said. Michael had wanted $50,000 for his sure-thing investment, and she'd refused. He'd called her selfish, said she was hoarding money she'd never lived to spend. The words had cut deep, especially coming so soon after Harold's death. After Victoria left, Eleanor double-locked the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. She moved to the window and watched the woman get into a black sedan with tinted windows. Not exactly the car of someone who had her best interests at heart. With shaking hands, Eleanor opened the manila envelope. The photos were from Thanksgiving, all right, but they'd been carefully selected. In each one, she looked confused or disheveled. Mouth open mid-word, eyes half closed, a spill on her blouse she didn't remember. Anyone looking at these would think she was in decline. But Eleanor remembered that day clearly. Michael had been taking pictures constantly with his phone, claiming he wanted to preserve memories. Now she understood why. She moved to Harold's study, unchanged since his death 2 years ago. His reading glasses still sat on the desk, his last crossword puzzle half finished. She picked up the phone and dialed Margaret's number from memory. Her mind was sharp enough for that, thank you very much. Margaret, it's Eleanor. I need the number for your son, the lawyer. Yes, the real estate one. Something's happened, and I think I'm going to need help. As she waited for Margaret to find the number, Eleanor looked around the room at the life she'd built with Harold. The house wasn't just property or an asset to be transferred. It was where they'd raised their children, where Harold had spent his last days, where every corner held a memory. She'd be damned if she'd let Michael and his vulture of an advisor take it from her, no matter what documents they waved in her face. But as she wrote down the lawyer's number, a cold dread settled in her stomach. Michael had been planning this, documenting her every stumble, every forgotten detail. He'd painted a picture of an old woman in decline, too stubborn to accept help. And Victoria Kellner, if that was even her real name, was clearly experienced at this kind of persuasion. Eleanor hung up the phone and immediately dialed the lawyer. As it rang, she looked at the papers Victoria had left behind. Somewhere in that legal labyrinth was a trap, she was certain. The question was whether she could spot it before it was too late. The rain began then, gentle at first but quickly becoming a steady drumbeat against the windows. Eleanor watched it streak down the glass, distorting the view of the street beyond. Somewhere out there, Michael was waiting for news, probably already spending the money he thought he'd make from selling her home. But Eleanor Morrison had survived the Great Depression as a child, raised 3 children on a teacher's salary, and nursed her husband through his final illness. She'd faced harder battles than this. As the lawyer's secretary answered the phone, Eleanor straightened her spine and prepared for war. They thought she'd lived long enough, did they? Well, she had news for them. She wasn't done fighting yet. The afternoon light was fading by the time Eleanor finished her call with the lawyer. He'd agreed to see her first thing in the morning, and his initial reaction to her story had been gratifying alarm. "Don't sign anything," he'd said firmly, "and document everything. If they contact you again, record it if you can." Eleanor made herself a fresh cup of tea and settled into Harold's chair in the study. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began to write, documenting everything she could remember about Victoria's visit, every threat veiled in concern, every manipulation disguised as care. Her handwriting was steady, clear, the penmanship of a woman who'd spent decades writing on blackboards. As she wrote, she thought about Michael as a boy. He'd been sweet once before his father left, and his mother struggled to make ends meet. Eleanor and Harold had tried to help, paying for his school supplies, taking him on summer vacations. When had that grateful child become this grasping man? Or had the seeds always been there, waiting for the right conditions to grow? The phone rang, startling her from her reverie. The caller ID showed Ruth's number. "Eleanor?" Her sister's voice was strained. "I just got the strangest call from Michael. He says you threw out some woman who was trying to help you? He's very upset." Eleanor closed her eyes. So it had begun already. "Ruth, did you tell Michael about my fall last winter? About the time I confused my dentist appointment?" A pause. "Well, yes, but only because he asked how you were doing. He seemed so concerned. He's trying to take my house, Ruth." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain and the ticking of Harold's grandfather clock. "That's Eleanor. That's a very serious accusation. Michael would never. He sent a woman here today with legal documents. She tried to pressure me into signing over partial ownership of the house. She threatened me with adult protective services if I didn't comply." "Maybe you misunderstood," Ruth said weakly. "Michael told me he was worried about you living alone. He said he had a plan to help by helping himself to my property." Eleanor's voice was sharper than she intended. "Ruth, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not in decline. I am not incompetent. I am a 78-year-old woman who occasionally forgets things and once slipped on ice, just like millions of other people my age who continue to live independently. But Michael is using those normal incidents to paint a picture of senility. And I need to know, what else have you told him?" Ruth's breathing was audible through the phone. Just little things. That you cried on Harold's birthday? That you sometimes talk to his photo? That you haven't been to church since the funeral?" Each revelation felt like a small betrayal. Eleanor had confided in her sister during their weekly calls, sharing her grief and her struggles, never imagining that Ruth was passing it all along to Michael, who was apparently keeping a file on her decline. "Those are signs of grief, Ruth, not dementia," Eleanor said quietly. "I lost my husband of 50 years. Did you expect me to be unchanged?" "I'm sorry," Ruth whispered. "I didn't think. He always sounded so caring when he asked about you. He said he wanted to make sure you were okay since he lived so far away." Eleanor thought about those photos in the envelope, the way Michael had captured her at her worst moments. He'd been building his case for at least 3 years, maybe longer. "What does he need money for, Ruth? Do you know?" He's been having some troubles. His business failed, and Karen left him. Took the kids. He's been living in a studio apartment, working at a call center. He kept talking about how unfair it was, how you were sitting on all that equity while he could barely make rent. The picture became clearer. Michael, desperate and bitter, looking at her house not as a family home, but as his ticket out of poverty. And she, the selfish aunt who wouldn't help, standing between him and salvation. "He's still my son," Ruth said defensively. "He's made mistakes, but he's trying to steal my home," Eleanor interrupted. "That's not a mistake, Ruth. It's a calculated plan. And you helped him, whether you meant to or not." After she hung up, Eleanor sat in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing force. She thought about the woman who'd sat on her sofa that afternoon, so polished and professional, so utterly without conscience. How many other elderly people had she visited? How many had signed those papers, either out of confusion, trust, or fear? A memory surfaced. Harold in this very room, just a month before he died, making her promise to be careful. "There are people who prey on the grieving," he'd said. "People who see a widow as an easy mark. Promise me you'll be careful, Ellie." Promise me you'll fight for what's ours. She'd promised, thinking he was being overly protective. Now she understood. He'd known her soft heart. Her tendency to trust family might make her vulnerable, but he'd also known her strength, the steel beneath the cardigans and tea cozies. Eleanor rose and moved through the house, turning on lights as she went. In the kitchen, she checked the stove. Off, of course. In the living room, she straightened a photo of Harold, meeting his eyes. I won't let them take it, she told him. Not our home, not our memories. The doorbell rang again, making her freeze. Through the peephole, she saw a young man in a rain-soaked jacket holding a clipboard. Mrs. Morrison, I'm from Adult Protective Services. We received a concerned call about your welfare. May I come in? Eleanor's blood ran cold. Victoria had said Michael might contact them, but she hadn't expected it to happen so fast. She kept the chain on as she opened the door. May I see your identification, please? The young man produced a badge, holding it up to the gap. It looked official, but Eleanor had learned not to trust appearances. It's rather late for a welfare check, isn't it? We respond to urgent concerns as quickly as possible, he said. Your nephew indicated you might be in immediate danger from your living situation. He mentioned you'd become paranoid, refusing help, making accusations. Stop right there, Eleanor said firmly. My nephew is attempting to fraudulently obtain my property. I have an appointment with an attorney tomorrow morning. If Adult Protective Services wishes to investigate my welfare, they can do so through proper channels. During business hours with my lawyer present. The man's expression hardened. Mrs. Morrison, refusing to cooperate with a welfare check doesn't look good. It suggests you might have something to hide. What I have is a right to privacy and due process. Eleanor shot back, surprising herself with her firmness. If you are who you say you are, then you know those rights. If you're not, then you're trespassing. Either way, this conversation is over. She closed the door and threw the deadbolt, her hands shaking. Through the window, she watched him return to a car where another figure waited. They sat there for several minutes before finally driving away. Eleanor picked up the phone again, this time dialing 911. She reported the suspicious visit, giving the dispatcher all the details. The woman on the other end was sympathetic. We've had reports of scammers posing as social workers, she said. You did the right thing not letting him in. Would you like an officer to come by? Yes, Eleanor said immediately. Yes, I would. While she waited for the police, Eleanor called Margaret back. I'm sorry to bother you again, but things are escalating. She explained the evening's events, feeling both validated and terrified as Margaret's gasps punctuated her story. Pack a bag, Margaret said firmly. You're staying with me tonight. We'll go to the lawyer together in the morning. For a moment, Eleanor wanted to accept. The house felt different now, invaded by Victoria's calculating presence and the fake social workers' veiled threats. But then she looked around at her home, at Harold's chair and their photos and the life they'd built, and her spine stiffened. No, she said. This is my home. I won't be driven out by bullies and con artists, but thank you, Margaret. Knowing you're there means everything. The police officer who arrived was young and earnest, taking careful notes as Eleanor explained the situation. He examined the business card Victoria had left and frowned. This company? I'll need to look into it, but something seems off. The address is just a mail drop, not an actual office. So she was a fraud? I can't say for certain yet, but I'd advise extreme caution. You mentioned your nephew orchestrated this? Eleanor nodded, showing him the photos Michael had taken, explaining how he'd been building a case against her competency. The officer's frown deepened with each revelation. This is actually more common than you'd think, he said. Family members who feel entitled to an inheritance getting impatient. The fact that they move so fast after you refuse to sign suggests they've done this before. You have that lawyer appointment tomorrow? First thing in the morning. Good. In the meantime, don't answer the door for anyone you don't know. If anyone claiming to be from social services or any other agency shows up, call us immediately. Real social workers don't make threatening visits at night, and they certainly don't pressure elderly people to sign documents. After he left, Eleanor double-checked all the locks and drew the curtains. The house felt like a fortress now, but whether she was keeping danger out or herself in, she couldn't say. She made herself a light dinner, forcing herself to eat despite her churning stomach, then settled into bed with a book, though the words swam before her eyes. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of strangers in her home, of Harold calling out warnings she couldn't quite hear. She woke to the sound of her phone ringing, the clock showing 3:17 a.m. You stupid old woman, Michael's voice was slurred, angry. You could have made this easy. We could have handled this like family. But no, you had to be difficult. You had to be selfish, just like always. Michael, Eleanor said, fully awake now, remembering the lawyer's advice to document everything. She fumbled for the recorder she'd placed by her bedside. Why are you calling me at this hour? Because you ruined everything, he shouted. Victoria says you're going to fight us. Do you have any idea how much money I already spent on this? How much I promised people? You're sitting in that museum of a house while I'm about to be evicted. My own aunt? And you won't help me. You tried to steal from me, Eleanor said quietly. You sent people to threaten me, to make me think I was losing my mind. That's not asking for help, Michael. That's elder abuse. He laughed, an ugly sound. Elder abuse? You want to see elder abuse? Wait until the whole family knows how you're hoarding Harold's money while your nephew lives on the street. Wait until everyone in that precious church of yours hears how you turned your back on blood. You think you're strong? You have no idea what I can do to you. Are you threatening me, Michael? I'm promising you, he snarled. Sign those papers, or I'll make your life hell. You think today was bad? That was just the beginning. I know where you shop, where you get your hair done, who your friends are. How long do you think you'll last when everyone thinks you're a selfish, senile old bat who can't take care of herself? The line went dead. Eleanor sat in the darkness, the recorder still running, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd known Michael was desperate, but the venom in his voice, the calculated cruelty of his plan, shook her more than Victoria's visit or the fake social worker. She didn't sleep again that night. Instead, she sat in Harold's study, writing down everything she could remember about the call, transcribing Michael's threats word for word. As dawn broke, painting the sky a weak gray, she dressed carefully in her best suit, the one she'd worn to Harold's funeral. If Michael wanted a fight, she'd give him one. But first, she had a stop to make. She drove through the empty early morning streets to the bank where she and Harold had done business for 50 years. The manager, Tom Bradley, was just arriving, and his face creased with concern when he saw her waiting. Mrs. Morrison, is everything all right? Tom, I need your help, Eleanor said. Someone is trying to steal my home, and I need to make sure my accounts are secure. Over coffee in his office, she told him everything. His expression grew darker with each detail. We've seen this before, he said grimly. Elder financial abuse, usually by family members. You did the right thing coming here. Let's put some safeguards in place. By the time Eleanor arrived at the lawyer's office, she'd secured her accounts, placed fraud alerts with all the credit bureaus, and had Tom's promise that any unusual activity would be flagged immediately. She felt like she was preparing for war, which she supposed she was. The lawyer, David Chen, was younger than she'd expected, but sharp as a tack. He listened to her story, examined the documents Victoria had left, and played the recording of Michael's threatening call. His expression grew increasingly grim. This is a sophisticated operation, he said finally. The documents are cleverly crafted to look legitimate, but there are several provisions that would essentially give your nephew complete control over your property while leaving you with all the liabilities. If you'd signed these, he could have forced a sale or taken out loans against the property, and you'd have had very little recourse. So it was a scam? More than that. It's attempted fraud, elder abuse, and based on that phone call, criminal threatening. Mrs. Morrison, I think we need to involve the police and possibly the FBI. This has interstate commerce written all over it, and I'd bet my license this isn't their first victim. Eleanor felt a mixture of relief and dread. What happens now? Now we fight back, David said firmly. First, we're going to file for a restraining order against your nephew. Second, we're going to report this to every relevant agency. Third, we're going to make sure your actual estate planning is ironclad. Do you have a will? Eleanor admitted she didn't. Not a formal one. She and Harold had always meant to, but somehow never gotten around to it. David nodded understandingly. Let's fix that today. I also want to discuss setting up a trust for the house, something that will protect it from any future attempts like this. And Mrs. Morrison, you might want to consider changing your phone number and varying your routines for a while. People like your nephew don't give up easily when money's involved. As Eleanor left the lawyer's office, she felt both empowered and exhausted. The fight was just beginning, but at least now she had allies, professionals who understood the game Michael was playing and how to counter it. Her phone rang as she reached her car. Ruth's number again. Eleanor, what have you done? Her sister was crying. Michael called me, hysterical. He says you're trying to have him arrested, that you're making up lies about him. How could you do this to family? Eleanor sat in her car, looking out at the bustling street, at people going about their normal lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in hers. Ruth, I'm going to say this once, so please listen. Michael is a criminal. He attempted to defraud me, and when I refused, he threatened me. I have it all documented. The fake documents, the impersonation of officials, the threats. I'm not doing this to him. He did it to himself. But he's desperate, Ruth sobbed. He made mistakes, but he's not a bad person. Can't you just help him? Give him something? I would have, Eleanor said quietly. If he'd come to me honestly, told me he was in trouble, asked for help, I would have found a way. But he didn't do that. He tried to take everything through lies and intimidation. He tried to make me think I was losing my mind. That's not desperation, Ruth. That's cruelty. You don't understand what it's like, Ruth said bitterly. You with your perfect house and your perfect life. You never had to struggle. Eleanor closed her eyes, thinking of the years she and Harold had scraped by, the second jobs, the careful budgeting, the sacrifices they'd made to pay off the mortgage. But there was no point explaining. Ruth had chosen her side. I'm sorry you feel that way, Eleanor said, but I won't apologize for protecting myself. And Ruth, if Michael contacts you about me again, you might want to think carefully about what you tell him. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse is also a crime. She ended the call and drove home, taking a different route than usual, checking her mirrors for anyone following. The paranoia felt strange but necessary. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed a van parked across the street. Estate Planning Solutions, emblazoned on the side. Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She pulled out her phone and called the police. Then David Chen, then sat in her locked car until the patrol unit arrived. The van pulled away as soon as the police car appeared, but not before the officer got the license plate. We'll run this, Officer Martinez assured her. In the meantime, you might want to consider installing security cameras. These people seem pretty bold. Eleanor nodded, adding it to her growing list of defenses. As she finally entered her house, she felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. This wasn't going to end quickly or easily. Michael and his associates, because surely Victoria Kellner wasn't working alone, had expected an easy mark. Instead, they'd found a fighter. She made herself tea and sat in the living room, looking at the papers Victoria had left behind. Somewhere out there were other elderly people, perhaps less sharp, less stubborn, or simply more trusting, who'd fallen for this scheme. How many houses had been stolen? How many lives destroyed? The thought strengthened her resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every vulnerable person these predators had targeted or would target. Eleanor might be 78, widowed and living alone, but she was far from defenseless. They'd wanted her house? Well, they'd awakened something much more dangerous. A woman with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. As the afternoon sun slanted through her windows, Eleanor began making calls. To the local news station, to the state's Elder Affairs Department, to AARP's Fraud Division. If Michael and his conspirators wanted attention, she'd make sure they got it, but probably not the kind they'd hoped for. The phone rang. Unknown number. Eleanor let it go to voicemail, then played it back. Mrs. Morrison, this is Victoria Kellner. I understand there's been some misunderstanding about our meeting yesterday. I'd very much like to clear this up. Litigation is so unpleasant and expensive, especially for someone on a fixed income. Perhaps we could meet and discuss a mutually beneficial solution. I'll be in touch. Eleanor saved the message and forwarded it to David Chen. Then she deadbolted her doors, closed her curtains, and settled in for what she knew would be a long siege. They thought she'd lived long enough. They were about to learn that Eleanor Morrison had plenty of fight left in her yet. The battle for her home had begun. Tentar Novamente, Gawk Editar Chapter 2, The Siege. The security cameras were installed by Thursday morning, their unblinking eyes monitoring every angle of Eleanor's property. Tom from the bank had recommended the company, his son-in-law's business, and they'd treated her with a respect that had become rare in recent days. As the technician showed her how to access the feeds on her phone, Eleanor felt like she was learning the customs of a new country, one where constant vigilance was the price of safety. See this app here? The young man explained patiently. You'll get an alert anytime someone approaches your door, and these motion sensors will trigger if anyone tries to access your windows. Eleanor nodded, though the technology felt overwhelming. A week ago, her biggest concern had been whether to plant tulips or daffodils along the front walk. Now she was living in an electronic fortress. The changes didn't stop there. David Chen had been thorough. New locks on all doors, a safety deposit box for important documents, and a detailed power of attorney that specifically excluded Michael and required 2 doctors to certify any claims of incapacity. She'd also changed her phone number, giving it only to a select few. But Michael was nothing if not persistent. Mrs. Morrison? The voice at her door on Friday afternoon was different, younger, nervous. Through the peephole, Eleanor saw a woman in her 20s, holding a bouquet of flowers. Delivery for you. Eleanor didn't open the door. Who are they from? The card says, from your loving nephew. Please forgive me. Leave them on the porch, Eleanor instructed. Thank you. She watched through the window as the woman departed, then called Officer Martinez. He arrived within minutes, photographing the flowers before carefully opening the card with gloved hands. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, he read. Let's handle this as a family. Uncle Harold would want us to work together. Call me at this number. There's a phone number here, different from the one you blocked. Is it safe to keep the flowers? Eleanor asked, feeling foolish even as she said it. I wouldn't, Martinez said seriously. We don't know if he's escalating. Better safe than sorry. He bagged the entire arrangement as evidence. Has he tried any other contact? Eleanor showed him the log she'd been keeping. 7 attempts to reach her through various family members,